All right, well, welcome to this session on employment for empowerment. By way of introduction, my name is Rishi Jaitley again, and a lot of these commitments are near and dear to my heart. What I'd like to do first is introduce my co-panelists before I set the stage for this discussion and say a little bit about my background. First, I'd like to call on stage Kahari Mosley, Director, Green Economy Initiatives at G-Tech Strategies. Kahari? Next, I'd like to call on stage Ms. Veronica Scott, founder and CEO of the Empowerment Plan in my hometown of Detroit, Michigan. And finally, I'd like to call on stage Garrett Reppenhagen, Director of Veterans Transition and Veterans Green Jobs. So before I sit down, a lot of this work is near and dear to my heart. We hear in our country a lot about unemployment. There's a narrative of unemployment that we're all quite familiar with. The narrative about young people and unemployment is also one a lot of us are familiar with. The narrative tends to be about the millennial generation is likely disproportionately affected by this decline, coming out of school, coming back from war, and more. I think the untold story in this narrative of young people like you, millennials like us, and employment, is that you have all come of age in a time where you are naturally creative, naturally expressive, naturally connected, and naturally self-starting. Whether you're aware of it or not, you've come of age in a time where not just Monday through Friday, but 24/7 are imbibed with those kinds of values. And I think, and we think as a panel, that because of that, if there's any generation that I think might lead solutions to two things. One, be self-starters themselves, create economic opportunities on their own, become entrepreneurs in their own right. It is this generation. And if there's any generation that's more inclined to think through employment and full employment in local community, it's this generation. I myself never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. I studied history in college, thought I was going to go to law school and pursue public service, whatever that meant. And after a career in education reform and then at Google for a while, I moved to Detroit, where I started an organization called Michigan Corps, which is a social network for Michigan people in the state and out of the state to connect with one another more productively on social change. I also last year started Kiva Detroit, which is the country's first big micro-lending effort where citizens in Detroit, Detroiters themselves, can find small businesses in their community looking for microloans, can themselves walk them through a loan process, can themselves make loans to those entrepreneurs over the internet, and then can themselves champion those small businesses on their own. In fact, Kiva Detroit was the first commitment ever at a Clinton Global Initiative Americas conference held last June in Chicago. And I now lead investing for the Knight Foundation across Detroit, focused especially on how do you give people a chance to participate in the city's positive momentum. And as I reflect back on kind of my contribution to employment in my own community and for my own self, I reflect really on how I grew up, actually, and being a millennial and coming of age at a time where it's natural to think in these terms, in the terms that I've described. And so today's session actually is an opportunity to hear from other people who are working with artists, with vulnerable citizens, with veterans, on these issues, both themselves and other people. So I'm going to go sit down there in a second, but I wanted to begin with Kahari, and I want every panelist to just begin by talking a little bit about how they intersect with some of these issues I've described. Then we'll open it up to more questions and brainstorming. Kahari?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Again, my name is Kahari Mosley. I'm the Director of Green Economy Initiatives at G-Tech Strategies, which is a Pittsburgh-based social enterprise that works on economic development, really from a green economic perspective. I see this intersection in a variety of ways. In much of the work that I do, we really focus on market transformation, and transforming markets so that the green economy is robust, and people are participating in it as consumers as well as producers and everywhere in between. So, you know, as we talk about the millennial generation, I think this generation has a unique opportunity to create all types of new markets that not only can create wealth, it create economic opportunities for people, but really address some of the greatest challenges that humanity has ever faced, you know, namely global warming, and really creating a green economy that can create wealth while at the same time allow us to be stewards of the planet. So that's really, you know, one of the primary places, you know, where I see that intersection. We talk about innovation and we talk about creativity. You know, it's going to be this generation, you know, that's really going to have the challenge of trying to figure out a way to create viable economic models that create sustainability for people all across the globe and raise the standard of living for everyone, while at the same time not polluting the air, the water, and the land, and creating a future for humanity for generations. So I think at an initial place, that's where I see the intersection happening.
Great. Veronica?
Well, I'm the founder of the Empowerment Plan, where I pay women to learn industrial sewing and manufacturing and then employ them full-time producing these self-heated, water-resistant sleeping bag coats. And we give them out to the homeless on the streets, as well as disaster relief and refugee camps globally. And it's strange for me to be in a university because it was only 3 months ago that I graduated. And I feel like I should be going to class, not up here. And, you know, this wasn't something I thought I would be doing, that I'd do, because I didn't have the experience. I didn't think I had the leadership skills to take it to the next level. I thought it was just an idea that I was sprinting with. I was like, I knew what I wanted, and I was just running at it, and hopefully I would get there. And maybe I'd get some help along the way. And at the end of the day, I was walking across the stage at graduation. I still expected myself to look for a job, to be hunting for that dream job that I was told that I needed to go for, that I needed to work at a design firm and get a nice paycheck, that my family, my teachers, and everybody told me was what I needed to do. And the biggest change I had to make was in myself, saying that maybe I had created not a job just for myself, but all of a sudden I had employed 5 previously homeless women with kids that were now depending on me for a paycheck. And that's really where I see us intersecting.
That's great. Garrett?
Well, I think, you know, from serving in Iraq, I think the face of veterans today has changed. And a lot of veterans today are millennials. You're talking about young men and women who are joining the military right out of high school at the age of 18, serving an average enlistment time of 4 to 6 years. They're coming out of the military experience, a lot of cases, 22, 26 years old, and come into a college environment where their peers sometimes are a lot younger, but in a lot of cases they're the same age. So, you know, I don't know how many military veterans are in the audience today. So if you look at your colleges, you'll see student veterans organizations popping up, and you'll see a lot of these things happening. And you know, you know, as far as unemployment, typically 30% higher unemployment rate for veterans than non-veterans. 1 out of 3 homeless are military veterans, and it's not surprising. You're coming back from a very intense experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, having experienced trauma on the battlefield. You come back with mental health conditions, and if you look at the homeless population, in a lot of cases, you're looking at a lot of mental health conditions and a lot of substance abuse problems. And with the amount of stigma impacting on soldiers coming home to really receive help, or the pride they have to avert themselves from getting help, you'll see that they self-medicate, and then they start having substance abuse problems as well. And as a sniper in Iraq, I was doing 3-day missions in trash piles, and you know, living in pretty severe conditions to accomplish my missions. And you know, it's in a lot of cases the veterans feel comfortable. They're independent. They're outdoors. You know, they have basically nobody's making rules for them. And it's, how does that impact you guys? Well, it's, first of all, if we're not solving their problems, it's predicted right now that Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, to care for them after they come home, it's going to be $934 billion. That's a huge impact on taxpayer money. Just recently, Sean Donovan, who's the Secretary of, I believe, Housing, was on Jon Stewart's show, The Daily Show, and he said that for each person who's homeless every year, it costs the taxpayer $40,000. You know, that's impacting you guys. You know, that's money that we're all going to have to pay as a society, but that's impacting you folks getting out there. So who's going to solve these problems, and whose responsibility is it? Well, if you're expecting the guys at the American Legion to fix that problem, they're probably not. We've got to come up with creative solutions ourselves to really address that and pull the veterans back up into our communities.
So one question I've got for you guys, in no particular order, is you know, one of the ways I think about what's happening with the millennial generation in particular as it relates to employment, whether looking for jobs, creating jobs for themselves, or helping others find jobs, is this notion of do well, inclination to do well, do good, and I like to think do new. In your work, you got to work backwards from one of them, really. I mean, what do you work backwards from? Do you work backwards from, you know, helping the women you're employing learn? Do you work backwards from doing well as a business? Ensuring the long-term sustainability of what you've created? I'm just interested in how do you think about these notions of doing well, doing good, and doing new at the same time?
That's a great question. I think, you know, personally, where I work from probably is do well, you know, or do good. And, you know, my background, you know, growing up on the north side of Pittsburgh, you know, particularly when I grew up there, it was a pretty rough area, you know, in the 80s and 90s, a lot of drugs, gangs, et cetera. So, you know, I kind of always approach my work, you know, from a perspective of my friends from elementary, middle, and high school who never made it, who slipped through the cracks. So much of my work's oriented toward, you know, those types of brothers and sisters that never made it, trying to figure out ways to prevent, you know, further generations and further people from falling into those traps. But I think also do new is an important aspect as well. You know, as we were talking earlier, back in the green room, one of the things that we do through my organization and our green workforce development programs, we do a lot of workforce development programs in underserved communities, low-income communities, public housing communities, taking folks who have been either chronically unemployed or chronically underemployed. Many of those folks who've been younger too, even though you may not, you know, you might only be 25 years old, you could very much be chronically underemployed. And we work with those folks, teaching them a variety of work skills that will allow them to move into the green economy and be successful. But at the same time, and this is where the do new comes in, is we add a leadership development layer to all of our workforce development. So we don't feel like we're just creating workers, but we're also creating leaders. Folks will be leaders in their workplace, but also to understand, you know, why that weatherization job is so important, or that solar panel installation job is so important. It's not just that paycheck that you're getting to take care of your family, but you're also having a much greater impact. And we want these people to be ambassadors as well and to be leaders, so that we're creating a network of leaders and not just folks who are going to punch in and punch out. And maybe down the line, some of these people may become entrepreneurs and start their own businesses, but very much coming from a do new perspective of we're not just training workers, we're also training leaders.
It sounds like, Kahari, your work, as you think about employment issues, you really are working backwards from social impact. Veronica, Garrett, how do you think about this? You know, there's revenue, there's all sorts of ways to think about this stuff.
And I think we're coming back from doing new and not really focusing on revenue, which was strange for me. I went to art and design school because I grew up in poverty and I just wanted to run away from it. I wanted to go get a job that would give me job security and financial stability and all of those things. And when I started the empowerment plan as a school project, I felt like this, you know, it wasn't a business to me yet. It was something that I could push to the ends of the earth and really work at, and maybe I would fail, but at least I tried. And I had that kind of freedom to fail while in school that was liberating. And what became the doing new part was that I hired individuals that didn't have any sewing skills. I didn't look for people that would produce the fastest or the most. And in the end, the product I designed would be that if it did its job well, and if the empowerment plan coat got out in the streets and created that connection between the homeless individual and the person doing the outreach, that it would become obsolete. Like, the code itself is only a vehicle for these women to learn. We're a manufacturing facility that doesn't really, in the end, care specifically about what we're manufacturing. You know, if our clients and if the people that we work with on the streets say that they need Tyvek Speedos instead of, you know, empowerment plan coats, then we will start making Tyvek Speedos. And we will do that to the best of our ability with these women, because it's not really important the product, but it's what these ladies are getting from it. Because I didn't recognize that when I started. I didn't recognize that this would affect anybody else besides myself, and that this was just something I was doing on the side. It was a hobby. It was a very strange hobby. I was spending 3 nights a week, every week, at a homeless shelter, just hanging out and talking to people, not volunteering, just talking. And, you know, passing out coats and seeing where it would take me. And when I hired my first person back in December of 2010 to just make the concept kind of real, see if it would work, try it, because I could always fail. I was already broke. I was living with my grandparents, eating ramen. I didn't really have a bottom to hit, you know? It's like, going to college, I can fail. And I realized after hiring Alicia, she had 3 kids, and she had been in the shelter system for 2 years and was just about to be booted out. And at that moment, 3 months later, after she had showed up 2 hours early to the interview, 3 months later, she had gotten enough money from me at a salary rate that she had moved out of the shelter system with her 3 kids into a brand new apartment, got herself a car, got them clean, and got them all enrolled in charter schools. And the youngest son, Tabian, who's 6, is learning Japanese. And that was just a... Thank you. That was really the profound moment that maybe after 2008, and we've kind of all recognized that things have changed, and the people that we relied on for answers didn't really have the right answers, that this is maybe a way to do something new. Maybe I don't know how to run a business, but maybe I don't need to learn from certain experiences that we've gone through.
Garrett, any reflections on this?
Well, I agree with both of you. I think if you're doing the right thing, you know, that always has to be your moral compass in anything you do. And if you start to compromise your own personal brand or your company's brand or your nonprofit's brand, there's going to be negative consequences always. So find a niche. Find that thing in society or the system or the process or whatever it is. You know, maybe it's even a product that needs to be made, and provide that service, fill that gap. And that's going to earn you a seat at the table, and it's going to make whatever you're doing successful, and it's going to feel right. You're going to feel good that you're doing it. One of the things that I try to impact on the veterans that come through our programs, I link them up with green jobs. Well, why do veterans and green jobs mix so well? Because veterans feel like they're actually doing a service for their community. It's providing them purpose and meaning and giving them a new identity. The word transition is used a lot in a lot of veterans organizations, and there is a lot of veterans organizations. And nobody has defined what transition means. At what point does a veteran transition and is no longer a military member, but now a civilian in our community with a good job? And it's a self-identity. And they get to that point a lot faster if they're doing something that they see themselves as very meaningful. So part of volunteering and serving others is incorporated in all the programs that I do for veterans, because it fills them up. It gets them on their feet every day. Even if they're homeless, if they're coming to work, they're starting to do community service or some important project, you see they start to change the way they dress. They start to change the way they talk. They start becoming professionals again, and some of those bad habits start slipping away, and they're replaced by good habits because they have a positive outlook on themselves. And if you do that yourself in your business or nonprofit, you're going to start to do that as well, and you know, you're only going to succeed and improve after that.
So I want to dig into this do new topic for a second here. You know, I think our this generation, this room is inclined to think new, is inclined to be disruptive, kind of naturally disruptive. When I worked at Google, we talk a lot about disrupting industries and disrupting governments and kind of upsetting people, really. But I want to talk about that. And you know, one of the things that we at Knight Foundation spend a lot of time thinking about in Detroit, in particular, is, you know, all of these initiatives have existing institutions and people that have been working on them for years. Kiva Detroit is a great example. You know, it is a citizen. It is a large microfund built by citizens, right? There are plenty of microfunds across Detroit and across Michigan. How do we as an institution in Detroit, think through how an initiative, a citizen-led initiative like that, partners with the existing economic development ecosystem. And so I think I don't know what the answer is there. I do think it's an important thing to consider, and I'd love for one, two, or three of you to think through how your initiatives, your innovations tie into the broader system.
Especially from the negative feedback standpoint of like how to start it up, and in general how to start a business. In Detroit specifically, we have a lot of people that just look at Detroit as what it was and what it will never be again, and then you look at the people that are coming in and see it for what it could be. But it doesn't mean that other half, that other negative, biased half isn't valuable to what you're doing. And that was a lot of breaking down barriers with people that were just so against my idea to start off with, but they liked the concept, but they would sit there and they'd rant and they'd be like, your business is gonna fail in these 25 different ways, and sit down and listen to me. And I'm like, all right, can you talk slower? I'm taking notes. Because it was a really interesting thing. In order to become the sustainable business, it was about hearing all those negative, this is gonna fail, you need this. And it became my to-do list.
You know, and what's happening in Detroit in particular right now is you've got this movement of artists, entrepreneurs, and creators moving into town, leading innovations in media, in economics, in homelessness, in jobs that are, you know, provoking questions from folks that have been working on this stuff for a while. Any other reflections on that topic?
I think, you know, when you find your niche, you also got to look. You got to look at who else is doing it, and if there's still a need, what are they doing wrong, or why haven't they been able to make it to scale to really be successful? And you're likely going to find a very revolutionary reason for that, something that is very different from what our society is saying you need to do, or what the typical successful map looks like. It's probably going to be something very different, and it's going to be scary to make that leap and actually try to move away from that. But it's also very exciting. You know, it's with veterans organizations. You know, there's a lot of old school you know, patterns out there. You've got your American Legions and your VFWs, and you know, these good old boy clubs basically that are trying to impact veterans issues. And for some reason, younger veterans aren't going to them. They're not showing up for nickel beers on a Friday night to play bingo, and you know, they're not going there. So those organizations have to change, or somebody has to do something different to bring these veterans in. And newer organizations are emerging, online communities, you know, organizations that are focused on specific skill building or professional development that is a little different than what our fathers or grandfathers had.
You know, one of the as the leader of a foundation in a city, a lot of people often ask me about, hey, you know, is it really tough when you see proposals coming in that kind of feel similar, and don't you wish they all combined and merged and things like that? I actually just personally see a lot of beauty in the redundancy, and like innovation communities to overlap and be soft on collaboration, not hard on consolidation. I think the more capital P kind of partnering that goes on, the more power centers you actually create. I reflect often about, you know, when Wendy Kopp was starting Teach for America, let's assume someone had told her that, no, there's actually an initiative, capital I initiative, that's working on this. Go figure out. And I think there are thousands of examples like that in our space as well. So it would be silly to do a session on kind of millennials and employment and not talk about the internet and the role you think the internet has played in some of your work in getting started and moving it along milestones, or whether you think we as a society are sort of lionizing the digital web and glorifying its ability to accelerate progress. I'd just be interested in how you think about the role of the web.
I mean, I look at it as, obviously, it's a revolutionary tool in the toolbox, but it's not the only tool. And I think, you know, so much of, I think, you know, what this discussion is about, you know, and what the, you know, millennial generation is about, and what I think, you know, it should be about is, you know, finding this balance between, you know, embracing new technologies and new inventions, but also holding on to certain things, you know, that have always, you know, made this country great, but embracing, you know, new things that are going to make, you know, the country greater, and, you know, finding, you know, that balance between that, you know, and And I think that, you know, that piece of it is so important. And the internet obviously plays a huge role in our ability to communicate and raise awareness over the programs that we do, but also a lot of what we do is consumer education, because we talk about green jobs and the green economy, and one of the things that we need is we need more consumer education. And obviously, I think the youngest people in this country are those who are most informed, I think, about sustainability. And as we go older up the ladder, folks are less and less, even very important decision makers and policy makers, I often find in state government and local government are very ill-informed. So it provides us to, you know, be able to have audio communications, video communication, and as well as the social networking aspect of it that many more people are embracing. But also to be, bluntly honest with you, we mix that stuff with the old school stuff, door knocking, and go door knocking in public housing communities and low-income communities and middle-income communities and upper-income communities. We have a project right now where we're going into actually middle and upper-income communities, educating them about the benefits of weatherization. But we're sending emails and we're doing Facebook and all that, but we're also sending out troops, you know, knocking on doors in the rain to say, look, this is so important. I want to come to your house and tell you that we're having a meeting and we're going to have contractors and we're going to have experts talking to you why, instead of putting that new deck or that new addition on the back of your house, you know, contribute to the green economy and get your house weatherized.
Well, I look at the internet as like a catch-22 in the best way. And the reason is because when I started this project, like I said, I was, you know, living with my grandparents. And the first time I needed microfunding, of course, I went to all my grandparents' friends and invited them to dinner so I could ask them for cash to start the project. And it just so happened that one of them happened to be a writer for the Detroit Free Press. They wrote an article, and from that second, with me and basically what looked like a giant trash bag, went viral. And I was just floored. You know, I was just like, here I am asking for $1,000 to run for a year, and all of a sudden, because the story went viral, we were getting backing that you know, actually, you know, supported us for the entire year. That include all of the women's salaries and everything included, and enough to get us going. And it wasn't until, you know, being interviewed on CNN that I recognized that I had created a job for myself, and it was only because of the social media kind of backing me in this idea, saying that you are doing a good thing and we're kind of here standing beside you in it. But the negative side is something that we kind of face every day, that people want the black and white. They wanted to stamp on me the person that's going to save and cure homelessness, like it was curable. And I'm going, oh my God, no, I'm doing coats. What are you doing? I'm not saving or doing something so large. And they wanted me to have that answer. And they wanted it to be in 140 characters and have a nice little picture to go along with it and everything. And I think it's just trying to find that balance, because shelters that I work with don't use social media, so I have a lot to learn from them. But my whole business depends upon it, mostly, just to get us more involved in the community and more people active within and understanding the women. We have almost entire transparency. We don't even have a wall separating our manufacturing facility. So it's all about knowing everybody that's a part of our business. So that's what social media offers us.
It's great nuance. Garrett, what about for you and your customers, so to speak, and yourself?
Yeah, I think you know, there's nothing the internet can duplicate. Basically, I don't know what I mean to say is there's something so powerful about community and one-on-one human interaction that really drives what you're doing. And you know, my biggest fear of failing a lot of times are the men and women that I'm actually servicing, and I don't connect with them through the internet typically. And you know, that is my hugest fear. If I fail all these men and women who are dependent on me, and I see them every day. I shake their hands. You know, I'm working with them all the time, and you know, I read an article actually on the flight over. I was flying United, so if any of you flying back on United, check it out. But it's an article about basically a woman's talking about online dating and how it's ruined the fun of dating. You know, and I think that applies here. That the internet should be a tool to get down and get human interaction as quickly as possible with the most effective and most amount of information possible. It's a great tool to share information and have that develop, but ultimately, if Veronica relied on the internet alone, that homeless person under the bridge is not going to receive a sleeping bag and a coat. That's just how it is. So you've got to eventually unplug and get out in your community and talk to people and network.
No, I definitely agree with you there. It's all about really getting dirty and part of the community. Yeah.
One quick thing I did want to add to that, and I agree with everything that's been said. One of the projects that we worked on last summer was a group of 18 to 24-year-olds who many of them had a rough go at life and were really adamant about turning their lives around. And we were able to partner with the City of Pittsburgh, a community development corporation, and a number of other entities to create a project where we built a 2-mile trail in one of Pittsburgh's signature parks. And I think one of the cool things about the internet was this was a group of young men who generally been told throughout their lives that they weren't going to be anything, and through our work, we went viral as well. Within the city and blogs and even like the newspapers blog, begin to cover the work that they did. So we would come in, with these articles from online, and it really validated them. It wasn't, the cover of the New York Times, but for them, they're like, man, we're on the Post-Gazette's website. We are someone, and it really was an encouraging factor that really, because those were some hard days. I mean, they were doing basically similar type of work that was done in the 1930s with the Civilian Conservation Corps. It was that kind of stuff that, that was really the spirit of the project that we were doing. So they were out in like 90-degree weather, moving boulders on a hillside. And but to come and see them and in the Post-Gazette, and then City Council gave them a proclamation, and and they had their own day in the city of Pittsburgh and that kind of stuff. Without the internet, City Council would have never found out about what we were doing, and it really validated the work that they were doing and gave them a lot of confidence moving forward.
It's great. I'll just say one more thing, and then we'll open it up to questions from you guys for about 15 minutes or so. For me, the internet has actually played sort of two roles. One, as a guy that was supposed to be a doctor, my parents probably think I still should be a doctor. The internet was sort of this helpful first step in social entrepreneurship. But by that I mean basic things like it was always every initiative I've started fun for me to see if URLs are available, and if they are, I just go do the project. I remember when I was living in India working for Google, I found out that something called India Voices was available. I went ahead and reserved indiavoices.org and started a citizen journalism platform with people, interviewing people across the country. And we don't talk often about the role the internet plays in bringing entrepreneurship home like that. So that's sort of one. It's just, and in Detroit, it's been just a helpful, accessible, demystifying way to begin. On the other hand, I see the internet as sort of I've experienced it as a really powerful empowerment tool, which is to say that it helps make participation in community more attractive. So with Kiva Detroit and all these other examples I could give you guys with, they all play out offline. But because there's sort of this digital component, it adds pixie dust to the project in a way that galvanizes more people to want to participate, want to be recognized, want to be honored, want to be featured, want to have that megaphone for a second. And I think using the internet as a megaphone for mobilizing more people to do what you want them to do has been really, really helpful for me in a lot of my initiatives. All right, so let's open it up to about 10 to 15 minutes of questions directed at anyone else in particular or all of us generally. Do we have a question? Right over here. This microphone's moving around.
Hi, my name is Ashley. My question's for Veronica. I work with homeless people in Chicago, and I was a two-part question. I'm wondering, one, how did you choose the women that you enrolled in your program? And two, is your funding primarily private donors, or do you receive grants as well?
So that's a really good question. The women, this was something that kind of happened organically. I didn't really make the decision to. All of a sudden, I had been working with Carhartt, and they had just donated 3 industrial machines and over 700 yards of fabric, and that was coming to my grandparents' house on a 2-ton freight truck. And at that point, I realized that it wasn't just going to be me making these in a basement. It needed to actually interact with the community. And so I went to a shelter, and I said, well, I don't know what to do. And the woman that organized and ran it said, hire somebody to help you. And she says, there's a lot of women here that need jobs, and they had 2 major female shelters. And I put out the word that there was a job and no experience needed. And I was interviewing mostly people that were 17 years older than me, and it was a very interesting experience because I had never really been the interviewee. I'd always been like the person getting the interview done too. So it was a interesting switch. I had never been on that side of the desk. And so the first interview was just basically who showed up, who was there on time, and who was there dressed with a printed resume and was excited and passionate and obviously driven, because when you're looking at the resume, most of the women hadn't had jobs in 5 years, 10 years, or they had, and every single person had a rap sheet, had a felony charge. And that was something that I was like, all right, I'm not going to start looking at that. I just need to see if you're present, if you would like to work with me on this, because I don't have everything figured out, and I hope that you have patience. Because I don't. And Alicia was one of those first people. She showed up 2 hours early, and it just kind of organically came to be that it was women with children because of the drive that Alicia showed me in the beginning. It was like the way that I could drastically affect and change her life, and not just her life, but her kids' lives, and how they grew up was just so profound. I could not do it again. And then that's basically what happened. As far as donors go, we are mostly we were funded by the public for a while, just donations of like $5 to $10. We do mostly get donations in now from private donors. And the grant process is tough sometimes. It takes a lot to get in the door, but once you're in, it's a great relationship to have and foster. But so while we were starting and while we were figuring out who we were, that wasn't the avenue we wanted to go down. And now that we figured that out, grants are definitely something we're actually finally going for. We're working actually with the Knight Foundation. We're working with Kresge and a few other major Detroit, but local grants, because I can actually drive them to our facility. I can drive them to the shelters that do our outreach. I can be like, all right, here it is. I'm not just sending you a 2-page paper on it. I'm making sure you understand as vividly as possible what it is we're doing.
There was a question over there somewhere. Yeah.
Do you want this? Yeah.
I think we're on video, so it'd be good to get the microphone.
So I think Kahari spoke to this a bit about consumer education and how do you think that I'm trying to figure out how to word this. So being that you're all very progressive, like it's all like green initiatives and stuff, I think that like transparency and stuff like that is something that it seems to me like you care about. And how do you monitor that, like when it's not such a progressive organization, I guess?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think that's one of the challenges, obviously, because obviously we live in a world where there is people over 35. Now we can debate whether that's a good or bad thing. I think it's a good thing, because we need folks who have a lot of life experience as well. So we often work with folks even in the green sector and the environmental sector, and there's definitely kind of a philosophical gap between kind of the young kind of progressive sustainability folks and the older folks who kind of have really been through the wars. They've been through the struggles of just trying to convince people that it was even important, back in the 70s and et cetera. So they do have, so it is kind of, us kind of coming in very encouraged and excited, and some may even argue naive, versus a kind of an experienced, jaded kind of view that, folks aren't going to come around. And it's like balancing, some of the wisdom of the folks who've been around, that may feel that, the ball can only go so far down the field with, that enthusiasm. And I think just working with people, in the work that we do, we work in a lot of communities where, folks, the first thing on their mind isn't how energy efficient is the building they live in. Their thing is, is my 17-year-old son going to get shot tonight? Or, how the heck am I going to pay the bills? My mother's living in the house, she has diabetes, and we're, you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, between food and groceries and medicine, et cetera. So I think, you know, again, I think this is where that patience comes in, and that sincere, you know, commitment to people and understanding that we're not going to meet everywhere where we want to meet them. You know, we can only meet them where they're at, you know, and work with folks. And there is going to be, you know, organizations and folks that we work with that aren't going to be necessarily as progressive, quote unquote, as we would want them to be. But I think that's also part of, I think, the value of the journey, the value of that human interaction, because they're never going to get there unless we are willing to sit down and work with those folks. If it just happens in a vacuum, it's never going to happen. So we also have to be willing to come out of our comfort zones and work with folks who don't do email, you know what I mean, that don't have an iPad or iPhone and don't do Twitter and Facebook but I also think that there's a unique value of having a room of people, of some people who's on Twitter every 5 minutes, a person who does it, you know, difference between Twittering and tweeting and, you know, completely messes up the whole lingo. And I think that's what we have to work towards, you know, as a society. And I think that's what this generation, I think, is uniquely placed, you know, in the arc of history to be able to do, is to continue to work through those divisions philosophically, you know, ethnically, diversity, the whole nine, you know what I mean, and really embrace our differences and see the value in it.
More questions? There's one over here.
Hi, this is directed at all of you, anyone that wants to answer. I'm studying reappropriation, I guess, in one of my classes right now, and I think all of you have alluded to at least somewhat, well, I mean, something that we're talking about is innovative ideas, innovative concepts and projects, and I'm curious, what kind of remix, what kind of reappropriation have you done of previous concepts or projects or ideas that drove you to doing what you're doing today? And as well as, I know that something for me that's been exceedingly helpful has been talking to friends of mine and just kind of talking to like-minded people. And I'm just kind of curious what kind of roles borrowing other ideas in creating an innovative idea, as well as what kind of network has been supportive and like fostering that kind of network. What role has that played, especially the reappropriation? Because I feel like I hear ideas constantly that I'm like, I could tweak that, you know, and I think that huge things have come of that. That wasn't very direct, sorry, but
it's great.
General.
Anyone want to start first? It's really insightful.
Well, I don't know. I mean, when I got out of the military, I was taking care of my soldiers in the military really well. The guys that were under me, I took care of. And when I got out of the military, they all signed a Mother's Day card and gave it to me. It was my go-away present. So I knew when I came out, I wanted to help. I wanted to still be part of that community, that military community. But I was no longer a service member. I was a veteran. And I quickly realized how much of an issue it was, is because I was personally impacted. I got home and you know, it was easy at first. I woke up in the morning at my mom's house. I was like, okay, it's a new day. I did everything the military trained me how to do, you know, went for a run, took a shower, ate, you know, and then I sat down on the couch. I was like, well, what do I do now? You know, and I realized right away that, you know, in the military, I was trained how to use all this equipment really well, whether it was a Singar radio, M1 tank, M16 machine gun, whatever it was. They trained me how to use that, disassemble it, put it back together really well. Then I was given a unit of people that I trusted with my life, I could depend on, that became my new family. And, you know, and then I was given a mission, and I was expected to go out and do that mission. And with the training I had and the people I had, I couldn't fail. And now here I am, I'm sitting on my couch, and I don't have training that applies to the real world. As a sniper in the military, there's not a lot of crossover. Yeah, and then, you know, I didn't have a unit anymore. I was by myself. I was alone, and I no longer had a mission. And that was the thing that hit me the most, is what I have to do is I have to give veterans a mission. I've got to find a mission myself, and that's it, giving other people missions. And since that day, it's worked. It's worked. I've sat down with veterans that have been out for 4 years, wasting away, getting VA money, eating pills that the VA gave them, playing PlayStation all day long, you know, and never getting out of their house or their underwear. You know, it's like, hey, man, first thing I say is, are you ready for a new mission? And their eyes light up. It's like, hey, no, I haven't heard somebody talk to me like that for a while. You know, what is this mission? It's like, well, I want you to help me green America. I want you to help me make America better. And he's like, okay, that's why I signed up in the first place. And nobody has confronted me. So sometimes it's not an operational reappropriation. It's just a reappropriation of an idea or a concept or that philosophy.
So I think what we're going to, I find that question just really, really important, because I think we live in a society that holds up the creation of, you know, new intellectual property, right? Like the next Google, the next this. You may very well have patented your thing and all of that, maybe. But you know, in Detroit, where, for instance, where every new idea is, you know, I challenge all of you to find a blank Detroit.org or DetroitBlank.org website. It's all taken. What I'm getting at is it's all remixing in a Detroit context. And all of the ideas that I see emanating emanate from highly conversational settings and are all about repurposing existing. We're so conditioned to think that we need the new IP. You know, Kiva Detroit is really an informal arrangement of Kiva.org, a local community organizer, and a microfinance bank in Boston, all kind of informally coming together to create something that feels brand new, but is really a kind of, an agreement. And so I think you're getting at something really important, and I think this next chapter of innovation ought to be kind of lowercasing what we mean by, you know, IP. We've got to actually now, what we're actually going to do right now is spend 10 minutes or so giving all of you the chance to talk with your neighbors about your ideas and about how what you learned so far from the panel might apply to some of your work. What we're going to do is each of us are kind of going to mingle around, walk around a little bit, listen to some of your ideas. But I encourage all of you to just spend a few minutes talking to your neighbors about what you've learned and how you might integrate some of these concepts into your work. And then after that, after we've heard as we walk around, we'll wrap up the session. So about 8 minutes to do this. Thank you. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back your moderator, Rishi Jaitley.
Hi, everybody. Hope that was a useful few minutes. So we're at the end of our time here. I'm going to give each of my panelists a strict 60 seconds to reflect. I know we've got the plenary starts at 4 sharp, so we want to make sure everyone's got enough time to get over there and mingle with us on the walkover. So Kahari, do you want to start?
Yeah, just really briefly, you know, again, I just want to reiterate, you know, how unique this opportunity is, you know, in the time, you know, right now in this country's history, you know, to transform, you know, the time when my grandfather was around, who was a coal miner from Western Pennsylvania, where you drop out of high school and get a decent job and work somewhere for 50 years and get a pension, you know, and go off to happy land. You know, that doesn't exist anymore. People are going to be changing jobs and very much more than any other generation. The thing that I'll leave with is think from an entrepreneurial point of view. And you know, and maybe, you know, 30, 40, 50 years from now, it won't be the millennial generation we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about the entrepreneurial generation.
That's great.
I just want to say that this business was a school project gone awry is the best way to describe it. And I wanted to, you know, this was a class project that I took into the business world, and I didn't think I could take it there because I didn't believe that I had the experience. And that I think what everybody needs to realize is that pretty much everything you've gone through in your life will train you to what you really want to do when you're in college, when you're getting out. And if you give yourself that room to experiment and to fail, you'll recognize all of those hidden inspirations and passions will come out, and you'll inadvertently create something that could be your career without even recognizing it. And I think that's the power of what the empowerment plan was, and the ability to affect other people with your idea as well.
From the greatest generation, the World War II veterans, the GI provided education for those folks pretty handsomely. And from that, we've had 14 Nobel Prize winners, 3 Supreme Court justices, 3 presidents, 12 senators, and 24 Pulitzer Prize winners. So with your help, we can really create the next greatest generation and the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans can come home with services and support from you guys that you helped develop, and we could really duplicate this process and maybe double these numbers.
You guys have been good. We've got 2.5 minutes to spare. But I guess what I want to leave you guys with is, as it relates to, when we hear about kind of this new economy we're all in, sometimes we hear about this notion of the long tail, which is that there's a market for everything. If you're building an interesting product here, someone will want to buy. If you deploy it properly, someone in the other part of the world will be interested in it. I really do think there's a long tail of markets, so to speak, in social change too, particularly in this issue. Whatever your concept is, idea is, as it relates to maximizing employment in local community. If there's one thing I've learned as an investor and as an entrepreneur, is that the country's sort of moving from big to small. We're beginning to value small scale innovation, small local power, for all sorts of reasons, particularly because of what we've observed in our country the last few years. So I'd encourage all of you to not doubt that there is a market for both on the customer side for what you guys are looking to do in employment or other issues, but also on the capital side. And the more you linger, the more likely it launches. So with that, thank you guys so much, and we're around to chat, but we've got to be at the other plenary at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
If anybody wants to try this on, be my guest.